a lot of back and forth. I'm certainly glad I have an EV because the price of fuel would probably tank me.
Yeah, that could be your financial contribution to the cause. Yeah.
Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Cal Roberts, and I would like to call this meeting to order. First of all, recognition of the territories of the New Chalmouth, Uchuckwacet, Taloquiet, and other areas within our boundaries of the Area C. I'd like to let everybody know that to attendees and delegates, this meeting is being recorded and live streamed to YouTube on the Regional District website. Today, in the office, have myself, Cal Roberts, Heather Thompson, Wendy Thompson, and from the Taloquiet First Nation is Saya Maso, representing the community. Online, I see other members, including Rochelle Cole, Tom Steer, Alan McCarthy, and Kirsten Johnson. Welcome all, and thank you for attending. The next item is the approval of the agenda. Do I have a mover for that, please? Thank you, Rochelle and Alan. Are there any questions with regards to the current agenda at this point? No, nothing. Okay, thank you. Next item 3, is West Coast Committee meeting of April 13th, 2022. Are there any questions or concerns with regards to those? Seeing none, thank you. Do I have a motion that the minutes of the West Coast Committee meeting held on April 13th, 2022 be received? Thanks, Alan and Tom. Item 4 is petitions, delegations, and presentations. And at this point, we would like to hold them to a 10-minute maximum. What we're going to do is do a slight change. We're going to have Ryan, Jeremy, and Liam Cook from Drift Manufacturing Company regarding their short-term lease application for Long Beach. I'd like you to go first, please, if you don't mind.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning, everybody.
Yeah, can you turn your volume up? We can't hear you there.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you hear us?
Little better?
A little better?
Seems to be broken a little bit.
Perhaps we'll just shout at you guys.
Just yell it out.
Is that okay? Can you...
That's a little better, thanks.
Yeah.
Go ahead, John.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so just wanted to introduce yourself real quick. My name is Ryan.
For some reason, we're not able to hear you at all clearly.
Cal? Let me just see if I can.
Is it a little better? Try again. A little closer, something.
Yeah, perhaps closer. Okay, so.
Cal, I can't hear anything.
Can you turn your video off and just go with your speaker?
Absolutely, yeah. Can you hear us?
Is that any better or no?
Not great.
Perhaps we'll try.
Yeah, tell them to leave the meeting. and walk.
You know, maybe you should try leaving the meeting and then coming back.
Yeah, I'll find
Technology. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So give him a minute.
Yeah, it shouldn't take long to wait for that.
Okay.
We have a look. Let's see if they're like that. Okay, you have a waiting list?
No,
No.
it shouldn't have. Janice, are they able to get back in again?
Just text her now.
Oh.
But
They should be able to get back in, yes.
There they are.
And we're back. Can you hear
Little louder.
us? Okay. If I,
No, it's not working.
they could try phoning. But
Yeah.
I think while they're doing it, maybe we should-
Yeah, well, you're not coming through. We can't hear you at all. So I think what we'll do is we'll change the delegation and let Saya go first, and then we'll try to get you in later, if that's okay.
Yep.
All right, thank you. Saya? Thank you.
They can phone in. I'll get Janice on the phone.
Hello, good morning. Well, I'll stand back a little bit. So good morning. Thank you for the welcome to the traditional territories. Clovis had requested a meeting with the West Coast Committee to have a discussion about reconciliation and have a workshop on that. The airport lands are really important to Tlaloquid, and certainly a long-standing dialogue about it. In the interest of getting through these reconciliation steps, I've been asked to present a discussion about Tlaloquid history. And in that will be a theme explaining what it means to have unceded title, unceded lands, and that will permeate the history presentation to today, leading to our discussion of where we're going. And I believe this will require multiple meetings, and I've been requested to invite this meeting to home for our next session, possibly. However, I'd like to start in the 1600s, pre-contact. You'd see Tlaloquid peoples as a whaling society, one of the few whaling societies in the world on the West Coast. There would be so much preparation before a whaler would go out. There was tremendous greatness that the chiefs would get from wealthing this food to its citizens, that one whale could feed the nation, and how much wealth came from it, the greatness that chiefs could get by potlatching. We were the cedar salmon people. Every item of our tools, our clothing, our boats, our houses were made of red cedar. There would be about 10,000 Tlaloquid people in our territories. In the summer, we'll be using fishing grounds closer to the ocean. In the winter, we'd move our villages up to sheltered bays. There were laws of abundance, laws of management that led to abundance. Rivers were managed with rock weirs to let the strongest fish through, and we would harvest from the middle of the run. We'd have so much food that we would move to the inlets in the winter and celebrate, storytell, and do work. Much like this, governance work needs to be witnessed by everybody, and these things couldn't occur without chiefs bringing their songs and curtains, all these crests that were owned by chiefs that were required at these ceremonies. So this is a snapshot of pre-contact Tlaokwa. In 1778, Captain Cook is landing in Friendly Cove. And it was around that time, more schooners are arriving on the West Coast. Begins a period of sovereign trade. They're arriving under flag and charter from their queens, Spanish, British, American schooners. There's decades of hunting of otter. We were trading. If a schooner was in our safe harbors of Tlaokwa, we would require other chiefs to trade through us before they would allow access to the schooner in our waters. We jealously protected our trade so that our chiefs would have greatness for potlatches. And so at this time, this period of trade is occurring. You'd hear some of our language. The root word for bird is mamati. The root word that is ma'uas, which is house. Mamati is houses in the trees. The Nuu-chah-nulth word for these newcomers that came to our shores was mamathni, which means houses so big they lived on the ocean. And in this contact era, you would read documents from journals from schooners that would describe that their sail mast is broken and they wanted to fix with a spruce tree and these great trees on shore. But they had to trade for everything. And it was written in a journal that the captain couldn't believe that you can't ask for a blade of grass without the natives wanting to trade for it. So this is in our contact era, this aggressive period of trade, and we were getting beads and metal, guns for hunting. A lot of these beads would adorn our clothing, and the West Coast, Tlaokwa has really unique cobalt blue trading beads, and you can walk the beach and they wash out of our shoreline, and you can find these trading beads on our shoreline. Getting close to about 1811 and 1812, Tlaokwa had expended many years of trade, investing in our desire to have our own schooner. We had traded many pelts with the Americans, and yet this boat wouldn't arrive for us after a number of years, creating tension of trade between us. And it leads to disagreements. The American schooner at this time had set up a military base on Mears Island, just up the inlet from Opitsit village. In this disagreement, our nation used our hunting trap lines along the shoreline to go along the inlet and raid the army base called Fort Defiance. That when they were chased out that inlet, that schooner bombed our village, cannon bombed it and burned it down, razed it to the ground. Ultimately, this left to the conflict of trade, the sinking of the Tonquin vessel. You'd see this anchor on display in Tofino at the Village Green. Whether we were demanding our boat that they should give their boat, or that they didn't want us to take their boat, the boat was exploded, or they set fire to the gunpowder. And at this time, America is really pursuing its interest to own all of North America, from Mexico to Alaska. In some of their first charters from presidents, it was described as it is their manifest destiny to own all of North America under one state. And that was exemplary in 1812, the War of Independence. They're warring northward against Britain and the Iroquois and the French and the Allies to push that border to the 49th parallel. On the West Coast in 1812, the sinking of the Tonquin in 1813, this is Tlaoquit on the front edge of that experience of Americans wanting to own, establish a military base in Clayoquot Sound, and continue pursuing northward. And quite feasibly, had it not been for Tlaoquit, Tofino could be using the American dollar today, even here, if that push northward hadn't been almost halted in Clayoquot Sound. 1812, 1850, Sir Douglas stopped making treaties in Victoria. They've signed 6 treaties in Victoria, a 1-page document written in English, signed with an X by the chiefs, and Songhees, Sooke, Esquimalt. There's a few other nations that signed these treaties, and it describes their right to fish as formally. What that means in a modern context is how they negotiate and implement it, whether they have the right to use their fishing traps or to close a river to fishing. 1850, so I described our population as 10,000 Tlaoquit, as described in some of the journal records. Sir Douglas saw that the population of First Nation people was really dwindling. Anecdotally, I can describe the population census for Opitsit in 1911. That was 110 people. We today can all show our lineage to those 10 families, those 110 Tlaoquit. All of our Tlaoquit can describe our connection to those 10 families today. But it just shows that timeline that I'm aware the population must have been going pretty small, and you could see Sir Douglas's interest in not sign more treaties. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to get approval from the rest of the West Coast Committee. We're going beyond the 10-minute maximum. So is there anybody have any issues with it? I'm quite pleased to hear this history. It's fantastic. Anybody? Comments? Okay, thank you. Carry on. Sorry, Marcel.
Sure. Yeah, I understood that we requested a reconciliation workshop with you, so that's why I'm going through this, and it will lay the context for the work to be done at home. And I wouldn't want you to come home without having heard this. So thank you for that time. So we're in 1911 and 1850, and the Spanish in South America were trying to obtain land by cannon fodder and fire and war. Americans done a mix of that with the British and treaty making and warring and making reservations. Yet up here, we still haven't ceded title, surrendered, or signed a treaty as I'm describing this era. And 1811, Sir Douglas, or 1850, Sir Douglas starts making treaties. 1911, Tlaoquit's population. 1960 was the first time First Nation people were allowed to use a lawyer. Around this time, throughout this era, there was the banning of the potlatch, a tool designed to a different way to take the First Nations land, take the chief's connection to the land, the potlatch is where they collected resources from their homeland, and then in the winter done the governance of the people and gave food out to everyone to ensure everyone was taken care of. And banning the potlatch was a tool to break that connection of people giving tithe to the chiefs from the homeland. And then that led to Tlaoquit transcribing our longhouse crest onto curtains, so that if the Indian agent were coming and we were doing our potlatch, and we have to host these potlatches with the crests of the chiefs on display to describe the ownership of their lands and all the stories that go with their greatness, we would have to fold up the curtain to pretend like we weren't potlatching if an Indian agent were coming. So this is part of our history as the banning of the potlatch occurred. Residential schools systems were applied to our people, which was another tool to try and steal land, to take children away from learning where to fish, how to hunt, to learn their connection to these lands, the language that connects them to the land. Yet still, we're here. The first thing that Tlaoquit does with our ability to go to court is in 1984, we went to court for Mears Island to stop logging. It took $5 million of 1984 dollars and 5 years of explaining in court our Aboriginal title, how we own these watersheds, our place names, our songs, our dances, our regalia, our crests, our continued use of the land, to show how, because it wasn't about whether the type of logging was permissible or not, or it was about which government has the right to issue a tree farm license. And so we described our title, and the province couldn't show a stitch of title the next day. And they asked for an injunction on logging so they could negotiate the nature of this thing called Aboriginal title. So the provincial government created the BC treaty process to deal with Tlaoquit's recently declared Aboriginal title. The elders made a one-page declaration for Mears Island Tribal Park in 1984. It describes how they envision sharing this Aboriginal title lands, describes the lush forest of an old-growth forest, the flora and the fauna, the medicinal plants, and the vibrancy of the mud flats and the hunting grounds. And it even references some cubic liters of drinking water for Tofino. We spent about 20 years negotiating Aboriginal title in a pretty broken system. The desire at the treaty table for 20 years was to negotiate binders worth of chapter language on every aspect of treaty making between government to government. Yet either the first sentence in the treaty offer was, you will extinguish your title and replace it with these treaty rights, or you will surrender your title and you will replace it. Or in later years, there wouldn't be language at the front, but at the end of every chapter, it would say, in the event of conflict of law, provincial and federal laws will supersede First Nation law. So then we couldn't say no to a mining permit or impacts to our drinking water. We would lose that if there was a conflict of law. And so Tlaoquit never signed any treaties. We actually had 2 AIPs go quite to advanced stages that were voted down for this lack of recognition of our title. That now we've won in court, and now we've won in a fisheries court case for our right to fish and sell, and a model of surrendering at the end of every chapter. Yeah. So still title has not been surrendered. In 2008, we did a land use vision for Kennedy Lake. Our second tribal park was declared Ha'ukmin Tribal Park. Ha'ukmin's root word is ha'uk, which means feast bowl. Ha'ukmin is feast bowl. Ha'uk is eat. And we would love to see Kennedy Lake become its true name again. Abundance of food and drinking water and fisheries. And so 2013, we did another tribal park for Tranquil Inlet. In 2014, our whole homeland was declared a tribal park on the 30th anniversary of Mears Island. And now with our strength of title, we're at the table with the province to protect old growth. As you would be aware, provincial announcements to set aside old growth areas. Tlaloquit culture depends on old growth trees. We can't make longhouses and totem poles and dugout canoes on second growth. So our sheer identity depends upon it. So we're using our title to bring the province to the table to say, as two governments here, we need something that recognizes that we're both here. And so we're close now to where we are today and why I'm here today. We've sent pretty clear correspondence on our interest to, at some point, get an MOU or a protocol with the airport. In these coming years in Tofino, in the most recent years, we've developed a Tribal Park Allies model where businesses are recognizing our unceded land. We're proposing something similar, and one of the first things we started to do is put a sign up at Sutton so the 1 million people coming here would know who Tlaloquit are. It was a strong sentiment that we're 1 million people come here and don't know whose territory they're in. This existence of title, just lastly, one more thing. The Chilcotin court case demonstrates that if you can demonstrate strong Aboriginal title to an area, you have a right to derive a benefit from the use of that land. And some of that is fee simple, some of it's crown land in their court case. And that's why we have an allies program where businesses contribute to Tribal Park regional services. And that includes sewage treatment, our ambition to have a maternity ward in Tofino to birth children in our homeland again. We have ambitions for a longhouse, a gymnasium, more stewardship and restoration to recover from the forestry that we were burdened with in the 50s, 60s, 70s. Millions of dollars of restoration is needed in rivers that have been walked away from. And Tlaloquit remembers what fisheries and what species was in that river. And we'd like to invest in our rivers again. And that takes using the economic engine that is in the day to fund these services. And it's certainly time when the airport comes to the table in this historic relationship. The draft protocol that was sent included some ambition to have the names of the chiefs visible at the airport for them to know the names of the chiefs when they're landing in our territory. Our allies do commit to best environmental development practices and the use of environmental monitors when doing construction. We envision with a protocol sign that we would have welcome figures possibly at the airport, a bigger gateway that explains where they are in when they're landing here. And we're also asking for a landing fee that will use this footprint that is in our territory that our community lives underneath. I've seen the airport expand to a digital format with bigger and larger planes coming. And it's time that we develop a tool that includes First Nations people whose lands they're on. I'm here today to, get some questions and answers on this discussion on behalf of Tlaloquit leadership, and then to invite you home for more of a working group. We know that this is the first step, but we're clear on where I think we jointly need to go. We know that the Musqueam Nation has an agreement with the Vancouver Airport. Club was pretty articulate in our right to benefit from the use of our lands, and the airport has an even deeper history with that. Club reservation land was taken away to make the airport, and there was a legal lease that described that it was to return to us after hostilities ended in 1945. So there's a very deep level discussion to have, but I don't think it's prudent to have those discussions without forming a way forward. And where are we going forward from here in a spirit of reconciliation? So I'd love to take some questions. I did email out what was kind of a business case study for the airport, and just so that we get an educated discussion on fees, and so I could take some questions and answers, and of course, set the table for our invite home where you can meet some of the other leaders and chiefs. And the documents that I sent were brought through council and directed by me to send. So they're looking for an update, and then instructed me to invite you home for our next meeting.
Well, thank you. Much appreciated. And yes, we did get the documents and your letter, and absolutely the history lesson that you've given is quite an eye opener, and I was not aware of it. I'm sure some of the other committee members were. Are there any questions from anybody on the West Coast Committee? Not seeing anything. Oh, Tom, go ahead, Tom.
Thank you, Si. I very much appreciate the prudent and informed about the long history that it clearly indicates the lands that have been utilized for centuries, eons, and the presentation also is in the conversations in that spirit of reconciliation and understanding. And these are important steps. And I don't so much have a question other than what's been laid out is very straightforward. And you talked, and what I'm looking forward is you've charted a fairly clear path forward, I believe. And this is the initial discussions. And I think a part of there's a lot of technicalities here, in terms of the service agreements, where I think that a good starting place is obviously with staff to be able to take that information and bring it forward. And some of those jurisdictional issues that I will admit that I'm not fully comprehensive of and would need further information. But what I do see is that clearly a path forward, which is further discussions, and especially I think appropriate back here on the homelands. And if we can maybe direct staff to be in conversation where how we can move that next stage forward, that important pieces, I think would be beneficial for us, obviously. And as the committee, we also are responsible back up to the main board of the ACRD. And so we'll take this information from this meeting and bring it to our board at our next, maybe at our next meeting, I'm not sure. So I think this is the something that hopefully staff can help us with in making those appropriate arrangements for the next layers of meeting. You've given a tremendous framework here, very clearly articulated in what's come forward, and I think I know that this will be a very good foundation to be building from and have those conversations moving forward. So once again, I thank you, and I thank the chiefs that were involved that I know, and I know you've had a recent election there, and so you do have new elected chief and council, but also the hereditary chiefs that stand strong with you. So thank you once again.
Thanks, Tom, for those comments. Are there any other? I see Alan, you have your hand up. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, thank you to the chair. Thank you, Aside, for your presentation and all. I just can't help think of our First Nation with Ucluelet, and as we are now into treaty, the things that you're talking about, we have faced as well. You know, and I can't help think of the connection between my family to the colloquiate through marriages years ago. Because my house, or our family house, is on the south end of Long Beach. It's called Kinnakumasit. So it gives you an understanding. Like I think I know like those issues and that you're describing throughout the history. You know, we've all been put in that same position, and we're trying to better our lives through what you're describing. So basically, I'm just saying that I think for now, like as Thomas said, you know, there's some logistic things, you know, that the staff can just go over, you know, those things that we may be facing. But I think in principle, I'm looking forward to, you know, having further conversation with you and your delegation and or your chief. I think that's very important that you know we you know have a sit, you know, this initial discussion, which this is starting for us. So thank you.
Thank you, Alan. Is there anybody else? Anybody else have any comments? Oh, go ahead, Rochelle.
I don't have anything to add. I think Tom covered most of it. I would just like to say thank you for the presentation today, Sarah. That's it's nice to see you actually get to be in the boardroom and everything and sharing your time with us. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your comments, Rochelle, and then Alan and Tom. Certainly, we do appreciate your presentation, Saya. It's very heartfelt, and with and through staff, we'll be getting back to you on this whole issue. So much appreciated. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll looking forward to welcoming you home, possibly meet at Tinwest or something like that. And you know, there's not likely anything to arrive to conclusion this year with the full use of the airport. And I think later in the agenda, you'll be talking about Kennedy Back Road systems. And yesterday, Ucluelet came to the table with $20,000 to help with the Guardians in the backcountry caretaking, preventing wildfires. And, you know, we'd lose $1 billion or more in forestry if it's not managed. And we have some seed money to buy some quads, and Ucluelet chipped in. We have a gap of $53,000, and just wanted to say lift up Ucluelet and their donation that they found in unused dollars. And if it's a discussion later today, just maybe remember that this discussion about the airport to show some goodwill to contribute towards the issue, and to keep it fresh in your mind for your discussions later today. And Tlecko for your time and years and the extra time that was asked for to get through the discussion today. Thank you.
Much appreciated. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, I do. We have received a chat that looks like it's spam, so I'm just asking committee members and staff not to click on it. It's asking to click on a link. I've never seen this before, but it is. I've confirmed with IT it's spam, so please don't click on the chat link.
Okay, thank you for that. Next item is Ryan Jeremy and Liam Cook from Drift Manufacturing. See if we can hear you a little bit better now. Thank you.
Hi there. Is that any better?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And sorry about that earlier. Also, thank you, Saya. It's really, really interesting to hear all the history there as well. So my name is Ryan Teremy. I'm here with my business partner and friend, Liam Cook. We are co-owners of Drift Manufacturing Company, which is a small business based in Tofino, on Tloquit territory. We're asking for a small lease lot at the airport so that we can increase and grow our business and increase the products that we're manufacturing. So just a little background on us and what Drift is essentially. So we've both been here and worked in Tofino for over 10 years. We've worked for several different companies, but mainly one of the larger whale watching companies in town. Liam's background, he's a Red Seal mechanic by trade. I have a background in marketing as well as administrative. So we've always created our own goods. Since we were younger, we've sewed and shaped and sanded and fabricated. We built and repaired, all with a focus on upcycling materials where and when possible, recycling, upcycling. So we started Drift in 2019. We had a lot of interest from friends on the little goods that we were making for surfing, for riding motorcycles, some of the repairs that we did as well. So we started Drift, and we opened up a small stall at the Tofino Saturday markets. Through that, we had a little bit of demand grow, lots of interest in the brand and what we're up to. And so COVID hit, kind of threw everything for a little bit of a loop for us, but allowed us to sort of reassess what it was that we're doing, what direction we were going. And we also found a small retail location in Tofino that we were able to work through, and so worked towards opening up a small space in Tofino. That happened last June in 2021. We made it through our first winter, which is great. Small business, as many of you know. You never know what's going to happen out here on the West Coast, but we made it and we're still here. Now the challenge is that we're looking for more workspace. As accommodation is always a challenge, workspace is also always a challenge out here. And yeah, we want to continue creating all of these upcycled goods that we can then put out there and also grow and expand on our business. And so I'll let you speak to Liam here. He's going to give you a bit of an example of some of the upcycled goods that we create and sell through our shop as well. So Liam,
perfect, thank you. So one of the things that we've been working on very recently, working with Surfrider, Alice Hoyland from Surfrider and Ben Bolton from Rugged Coast, is the beach debris foam, or the float box, basically the float box mandate there, as they're trying to change over, get rid of the flotation foam. And what I started to do was build surfboards out of this dock foam, as this example behind me. So something that we're looking for in this space is to be able to process the foam to then be manufactured into, say, a surfboard or a boogie board, something like that on the coast. So it keeps it out of the landfills, basically. We don't have to just use beach debris foam. We could even use packing foam as well. And what we're trying to do is process this foam into these blanks, which then gets created into usable items, potentially eventually in the future, maybe even construction material would be nice. One of our processes as well is using reclaimed wood, upcycled wood, to then add to these surfboards or other little knickknacks such as these hand planes that we use for body surfing. We make change mats out of it and whatnot from the coast. And we're not going to cutting down trees and whatnot for this. This is all just reclaimed whatever's laying around, so it doesn't end up being burnt, rotting, or end up in a landfill. One of our other projects that we like to do is creating things out of steel. So I like to do a little bit of welding and whatnot. So we like to keep that out of the dumpster as well. Plastics, you name it, we have in the future hopes to be able to process plastics into more usable and functional materials that we then use for leisure, such as surfing, or even potentially some construction material for decking and whatnot. Yeah.
So I think the focus of the space that we're looking for really is to enhance these repurposing of this EPS foam, which is often found on the beaches, remote locations, and pulled out. The challenges with this foam is that, generally speaking, it just goes directly to landfills. And our direction here is that the surf industry is always creating surfboard blanks. Surf industry is a massive industry worldwide, obviously. They're creating new foam where there's all of this other foam that's available still and essentially just going into landfills. And so this is where we believe, through working with local nonprofit organizations, we have an opportunity to make a small initial impact on the environmental component of the surf industry, but hopefully grow it into something larger as well, and share information as well, so this can be broadened beyond our small town of Tofino and ACRD. So the challenges are essentially that we need space to store and process this materials, and that's again what we're going to focus on with this space that we're looking for at the airport. So what essentially we're looking for is roughly 25 to 3,500 square foot lot. So something very small. We're looking simply to do a temporary structures out there, most likely shipping containers. So 2 shipping containers essentially with a small roof over top, all temporary again. And we're very flexible as well with what the lease lots are. We understand that there is a restructuring process at the airport and looking for long-term plans. And so we're sort of allowing ourselves to be very flexible while we get our sort of business component underway. And so we're looking for that roughly 25 to 3,500 square feet. We understand there's no services currently, but we would be willing to make an investment into setting up power from the power lines to this lot. We've also discussed the opportunity for water and working with the airport and the ACRD to get water to our lot, but we're not married to that as well. We're looking at other options as far as rainwater catchment. We can work from a generator,
Some
solar. Yeah, we're very flexible with all these components as well. We've discussed and thought about security of the lot as well. So there's a small opportunity if we had a property sort of manager, so to speak, who either lives on site or we're going to be there on a daily basis essentially as well to be working on the site. The other option would be to fence the area if it was necessary as well. And again, want to emphasize the fact that we are willing to put investment into this space.
and also be very mobile in case the opportunity is no longer available and we have to move on.
Yeah.
Very open to that.
Yeah. And so
Thank you, gentlemen. That's food for thought that we'll pass on through to staff. Are there any questions from any of the members of the West Coast Committee? Go ahead, Tom. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, guys. Yeah, I appreciate it. And of course, love the idea. One of the, and you brought up a few of the factors that we'll need to address. It will be later in the agenda where we're looking at those long-term management plans in the short and long-term leasing. So that will be a consideration. In concept, love the idea. I just had a quick question because I love the concept of what you're doing. And one of the big ticket factors, and we'll be in here, and even to a small way, is anything to do with decreasing the load on our landfill is always something that I'll advocate for in our next thing. So it will be a checkpoint there. Just in terms of source material in the long term. So at this point, it's repurposing that, say, found materials at a certain point in time. Hopefully that will, will put you out of business by not having it out into the environment. But where would you be looking for those larger sources of reclaimed material if it was inadequate in our region? Would you be bringing it in, so to speak, or be looking for alternative sources of type material?
Yeah,
No.
there's certainly a couple points on this.
Yeah. So one of the options that I have considered exactly this question, I had Ben Bolton and I sat down with it, and we are hoping in the long term that it does put us out of that business of getting these large pieces of foam off the beach. And then, so one of the options we were sourcing was then going through the landfill and mining, as you could say, mining materials. The other option is to try and keep or reduce the load on the recycling depot as well, being able to redirect some of this recycling, such as packaging foam from TVs and electronics and all that kind of jazz, right? Redirecting that into our facility, which then gets processed into a blank, which then becomes a surfboard. For that exact example as well, a broken surfboard otherwise would go to the dump. You take that and then repurpose that back into another board, whether it be gluing it together, grinding it up, shredding it, and then reforming it. That's definitely what we're hoping to do in the future, is to try and bring this stuff back to its end of life being extended and extended and extended. And I mean, I wouldn't mind in 10, 15 years if I was out of business with it.
Yeah.
Because that would mean I've put a big dent in it,
We certainly don't have aspirations to become millionaires with this. We really are after the impact more than anything else. And the lifestyle. We love being where we are and being able to surf every day and to be able to give back in a really meaningful way is important to us. And so I hope that answers your question there. Yeah.
Thanks for that. Much appreciated. Any other questions from anyone? Seeing none. Thank you, gentlemen. Very worthwhile project that you're working on, and we'll probably end up getting back to you through staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
very
Chair.
much.
Appreciate it.
Cheers. Have a good day.
Next item, is there any correspondence? None. Seeing none. Thank you. Item 6 is a request for a decision with regards to the Long Beach Airport short-term lease applications. And I think that's Jenny. There she is. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So yes, good timing as far as the discussion goes. So we are, from a staff perspective, receiving a lot of applications and interest. This is one of them, but we received many. And so we're really looking at how we manage this situation where we've received support from the committee to move forward with coming up with a long-term development plan, business plan for the airport, what that looks like. We realize that for that to have proper consultation engagement with everyone who's required, it's going to be a long process. It's going to be about 2 years. We figured to do this correctly and effectively. So what do we do with this interest that's coming in? In the past, we've been approving short-term leases on a case-by-case basis. They come to the committee, we review them, and we set them up. We haven't been charging fees for this. There is a significant amount of staff time that is involved. And so we've looked at either continuing to move forward and work through these applications and bring them to the committee and the board, or consider a moratorium and not work on this, and then just focus on developing a long-term plan and put all of our efforts into that and move that forward. And in the interim, if there's requests, then we just tell people we're holding on everything until we have a long-term vision in place. One of the benefits of that is that although these are short-term leases that we've been approving, we don't have any long-term leases in effect due to a lot of challenges. But some of these short-term leases, they have no rights to the land. We try to make people very well aware of that, like this is a short-term lease. At the end of those 3 years, you have no guarantee to renew because that is legally the situation. That's why long-term leases are really challenging, because it does give people right to the land. So that is true, but there is concern that as we approve these on an ad hoc, one-by-one basis, that when we do have a long-term plan in place, if it looks much different than what we've been approving, and we're kicking out a lot of people, and a lot of people who are not-for-profits, who have great business plans, there could be some public, definitely some concern from the proponents or the people who have leases that are getting booted out, even though we're explicit with them at the beginning that they have no right to the land. But there could be concerns with that. It's a minor risk. They have no legal representation, but there might be some concerns. So that's one thing we have to consider when we're looking at this, and a moratorium would, of course, reduce any of that concern for the future. However, the leases do provide financial revenue for the airport. They are, for the next 2 years, it potentially could be a good use of the space. We could always, as our delegation has suggested, that we can always relocate them to another location or look at accommodating the situation elsewise. Regardless, if we are going to proceed with reviewing and improving these applications, what we've looking at doing is actually doing a 2-stage process. So a preliminary concept proposal, and having a fee associated with that, because it still is staff time to talk with them, explain what's required, and get them basically a concept together, present that to the committee. And if that's approved, then we will consider investing more staff time, and the applicant would then invest more of their time, and we would go through the detailed development of the lease. And so that's coming up with the lot size, as well as the lease document, detailing out services, looking at those options. A lot, just so much staff time really goes into each and every one of these. So if the committee supports moving forward with this, we've recommended that we established 2 fees. One is a $300 fee for preliminary lease applications. And then if that's approved, we would then have a $700 fee for final lease applications. The preliminary would be approved by the West Coast Committee, and the final would then go to the board for final approval, and or we could still bring it back to the committee and then the board. If the committee supports this, we would develop like a frequently asked questions, formal applications that people can complete, and really formalize the process and get a better system in place. So the resolution that's sitting here is to move forward with the application fees, but there is the other option that we've provided, which is to put a moratorium. So I'm happy to answer any questions that that the committee has. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that, Jenny. Any questions? Oh, Rochelle, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Jenny. I'm wondering, I think you said it, but just to be very clear, is the coming together of the big picture and, you know, forming the big plan, is it being delayed because of all the times that are having to be spent dealing with the applications in the short term for, you know, for the short term solutions? For now, is it pushing the big picture and where we really need to get to off further?
Thank you for the question through the chair. I would not really, like for us, we're working on the project plan for this. We're going to have to use a consultant and engage that. We have resources allocated in the work plan. It's really, we are resource limited for sure. So as we spend time on this, it does have a minor impact, but the majority of the long-term plan, like we have to put new resources and consulting services in place to make that proceed. However, you know, if we say just absolutely not, this is our number one priority, push on that and don't do these applications, it would provide a little bit, it would offset those resources to that. But I wouldn't say that it's one or the other.
If I could add to that, if that's okay, all I see is Jenny, so hopefully, Kelly, you're okay. If I can add to that, thank you. Sorry, I just pulled over and I'm still driving up, but I think the vision for the airport needs to be something that is discussed with the larger community, including the appropriate nations, Tla'uq'uit, as we just heard from Saya, just to make sure that we're clear on the foundation that we're building on, and that foundation is suitable for the long term. And I think that is the bigger element here. The bigger time element is making sure that we have room for that conversation. After that takes place, then we're looking at infrastructure. Then we're looking at you know, consultants that know the business of airports and whatnot to help with the next phase. But I would argue the longest portion of conversation that needs to occur is with that greater community to make sure that the vision jives with where the community wants to go, and that all the interested parties that need to be at the table are actually part of that table.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, totally appropriate that all parties are involved in this process for sure. And I see, Tom, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think Danielle and Jenny answered some of the questions that Director Cole had brought forward in terms of the focus and on the long-term management plan, land development plan that is we know is critical for that area. I was convinced to just go ahead with a moratorium when I first read the report. In further reviewing it and in the comments that were just made now, because I think it is critical to have that long-term land development plan instead of throwing the darts at the table as we've done historically. That being said, I think you've presented an elegant solution for that interim for those short-term leases that I think, as we've noted over time, that those have becoming, the volume is becoming increasing. Recognizing that with an increased two-stage lease system that you brought forward, that it may also, I would suggest that, and I don't know if that would have to be an amendment to the recommendation, but that those fees at a cost recovery, and you've noted in the report that it could be as high as up to $1,600, and the suggestion here is about $1,000. So my recommendation would be to increase that. And one of the reasons for that is so that you may weed out some of those applications that are just fishing with no appropriate plan in place to bring those kinds of the type of work that will be needed for staff to bring that to fruition. So I'm going to support the recommendation, but I don't know if it, and I've looked to the board and maybe to staff and I'm not sure how that fee application was settled upon in terms of that recovery, cost recovery for staff. But maybe Jenny, if you wanted to speak to that, and then if the board was comfortable in the end after discussion with moving the recommendation forward, that I would suggest a change in that fee application.
Yeah, thanks for that. Jenny, your comment?
Through the chair, I can't be happier when someone says we need to charge more to recover more costs, because for every service, that is what we are always struggling with government. I think that we always set our fees lower than they probably are, even when we're estimating. Very astute observation. So in our financial section, we have our estimate, and of course it does vary completely on the applicant and the type of application, but we really do think it can be between $800 and $1,600 in costs. We looked at other airports. We used Nanaimo. They have a $1,000 fee for a lease application. And so we sort of tried to balance our estimated costs with what neighboring airports are doing. However, I would be very comfortable suggesting that if we wanted to shoot for the $1,600 cost recovery, which I think is appropriate, that we would set the $300 fee at $500 and the final application fee at $1,100. And that would bring us up to a full cost recovery in our worst case scenario. And it even more supports the concept of, again, making sure that we are getting very serious applicants and these aren't trivial inquiries.
Thank you, Jenny. Is there any other questions from anybody? Oh, Rochelle, go ahead.
Sorry, I have another question through the chair, Jenny. Is there a timeline? Because if we are, a couple of years down the road, we want to have the big picture in place. Is there a timeline where we're going? It doesn't make any sense to be taking applications for these short-term agreements, because it's going to be a make work project and we're going to have to turn around and evict people, or however that looks, that we would stop and then there would be a moratorium so that the real big picture can come into play and we can actually action on it when the time comes?
Through the chair, excellent question. So with this proposed system, and of course, I think everyone here who's on the committee would be involved in the process as we unfold and sort of see how the land use plan and vision starts looking. So as we get closer to a final document, everyone's going to be seeing that as it develops. Now, these conceptual plans will be able to come to the committee and the information will be open to the public. So anyone who is looking to apply would be able to look at the draft documents. They themselves could see whether or not their lease application meets or doesn't meet basically the vision as it comes closer and closer into clarity. And then the committee could say, I just don't think that your application matches where the direction or path that we're going. And so we don't recommend that we proceed at the conceptual level. So I think that this system actually allows for us to provide more clarity as we get it. And then also to just say, no, this concept doesn't fit. We don't think it does. That would be my suggestion.
Yeah, thank you. Are you satisfied with that, Rochelle? And Tom, your hand is still up. Do you have any other comment?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I was just going to wait to see if there was any other conversation around that, and then I was going to make the recommendation with I don't know if I need to make I can just change the numbers rather than as stated there, but I was wanting to make sure that the rest of the committee had a chance for input.
Yeah, thank you. Any other comments? Yeah, and you can go ahead, Alan.
Yes, thank you. I think initially when I read this report, I was thinking of the moratorium, but then now we're having a conversation with I think it was Danielle that was speaking, and some of the alternative things that would be like the charging of the fees. But I guess one question I had in the report for the management of the long-term management plan, Jenny, it says this will be ready by the latter part of 2022. Could you be more specific?
Yeah, through the chair, we're actually looking to start the project at the latter part of 2022. So that means like we're basically setting aside the summer to develop a terms of reference, get the resources internally in place, get our external resources in place, and come up with the time concept. There's going to be a lot of like sort of pre-planning, and then the engagement. What does that look like? How do we do that? And so we think by the end of 2022, we might be able to actually engage. And I do expect that we will come back to the committee, probably early in the fall, with a project plan. So you guys can see what the project plan is going to look like, just as far as us rolling it out. And when I say 2 years, so if we're starting fall 2022, definitely a full year. So all of 2023 likely will have a final plan in 2024 is what I would, being realistic, think that we're actually going to achieve. So.
Okay, thank you for that. Is that all right with you, Al?
Yes. Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So I have a question. Is this going to, we're talking the latter part of 2022, Jenny, with consultation from professionals outside of the regional district, are you satisfied that this is going to be able to be accomplished within the 2-year time period?
I think that it is reasonable that we will have a final plan by 2024. Now, I think Daniel's comments about making sure that we're having adequate engagement with the people and having that discussion, there's a lot of unknowns on what that looks like. But when I look at sort of like official community plans and other, very intense engagement processes, even solid waste management plan updates, like we're guessing that 2 years is achievable. And I think that, you raise a valid point. If something goes sideways or if we need more time, the key for this, and I think when we've looked at updating the land use plan in the past, not everyone who's on the committee was involved in that, and I wasn't at the time, but my big understanding is that we really didn't take the time to talk with people and to make sure that what we're presenting and what we're doing is in line with what we need to achieve as for the entire area, right? And for the West Coast, there's so many people, so many communities, and so many affected parties that we want to make sure that we are getting a good vision that works, and it is the best vision for the airport and the use of those lands. So hopefully 2024, and really the engagement part and the consultation is going to be the only thing that could delay that. I can see that as a possibility.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other comments? Rochelle, go ahead.
Sorry, one final question, because I can't remember off the top of my head, but using external, because when this whole beginning of planning happens this fall, we budgeted money for, yeah, okay. And we will do again. Okay, just checking. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for that. Thanks, Jenny. Yeah, we appreciate all the work that's going into this, and hopefully we have enough time allotted to carry this through. Now, Tom, if you want to make that recommendation, please go ahead.
Great, sure, Chair. That the West Coast Committee recommend that the Alberni Clackamas Regional District Board of Directors approve the updating of bylaw R1016-5 to Fino Ucluelet Airport fees to include preliminary lease application fees of $500 and final lease application fees of $1,100 per application.
Seconded by Rochelle. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. The next item is a request for a decision for Long Beach Airport lease lot request for Drift Manufacturing Company. Any comments? Go ahead, Jenny.
I will speak just very briefly to this. It was excellent that we've had a delegation come and present on this. I think it's always better if they get to speak to their own proposal. So they've definitely put this together. It is still in concept. If the committee supports the lease proposal in concept, that is when we will invest the difference, pardon me, of our staff time to come up with a lot, visit with them on site, determine exactly how we are going to service them and support that. So they will be working with Mark and myself to put together a detailed proposal if this is supported by the committee.
Thank you. Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, I'm willing to make the recommendation if there was no other comments regarding that. I think, Jenny, if there was any concerns, it would have been in the report, and the recommendation is to support it this time. So I'm willing to make that recommendation if there are, unless there are any comments from the rest of the committee.
Any other comments? Do we have a seconder? Kirsten, thank you. All those in favor? Carried, thank you. Thanks, Jenny. The next item is item C, a request for decision with regards to vehicle parking pilot program for Long Beach Airport. And is that you again, Jenny? Thank you.
Yeah, I'll be speaking to this. So at the airport, we have had overnight and long-term parking issues. We do not charge for vehicle parking. We do for airplanes, which is great. And so from a management perspective, we do run into issues already with that. Parks Canada has a site security service. They do a scan of our parking area, but it's not, it's just to make sure that, you know, nothing is absolutely crazy. That is not our service that we enlist. So it is a nice addition that we see. So we will get notified if there's a serious problem. The District of Tofino has recently implemented a parking system using Robbins, and it is a mobile parking system, payment system. They went through a proper RFQ and P process to select and implement this system. Robbins has approached us because they're already doing the system for Tofino and said, you know, we could do this for you guys too. And they provided a fairly detailed proposal, which we've attached. For us, in order to meet our procurement policy, we really probably for a long-term, not probably, for a long-term solution to implement here, we would want to go through an RFP process ourselves. However, we could do a 6-month trial. That would align very much with our procurement policy, as well as it would give us an opportunity to evaluate the system, see if it is effective and will work for us, and to work out any of the nuances that we need to. They've said that that's not a problem. It's a very low startup cost for them. It's really just installing the signs. For us, we would need to make some minor bylaw amendments in order to allow us to regulate the parking. We would look to simply mirror the system in Tofino for consistency for all the fees, and then we could see if this could be a potential solution for us. It obviously presents a lot of potential revenue, and it could solve or at least reduce some of our concerns with overnight parking and illegal camping issues. So we are recommending that the committee support us in implementing a 6-month pilot. So that would start July 1st and just take us through the heavy season this summer. We know that we couldn't possibly put together an RFP to have in place for the summer as well. So this would help us to expedite the system to address the summer 2022 at the airport. Yeah, if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Jenny. Questions? Tom, go ahead.
Great. Thank you, Jenny. Yeah, just having gone through this, as you know, with the Tofino and the paid parking, I very much support the idea of generating some revenues from those vacant spaces. And the pilot project is a good way to go. It is in terms of if it is successful, and we are looking at going out to an RFP, that there will be a lot of other comments that I would be having in terms of the process and how we might go about implementing that, just based on the experience that we've just gone through in Tofino. So unless there was, once again, any other comments from committee, I can make that recommendation unless I see any hands come up.
So yeah, thanks for that, Tom. I have a question for Jenny. So how would people know? Will there be signage placed, and is there a parking meter that they buy tickets, that sort of thing? Just a general question. Thank you.
Well, I'll let Mark jump in if he has more information, but my understanding is, I don't know if you've ever been to different places, none comes to mind, but basically the sign is there, right? And there's enough of them. So anywhere where you're parking, you see the sign and it says you can pay by app, you can pay by phoning in, you can pay through all these methods. There will be no physical infrastructure at the airport, which is why it's such an easy system to implement. And so the one person who still doesn't have a cell phone will, there is one person who doesn't have a cell phone. So there might be a few people who can't implement that. And I'm not sure, Mark, what we do about that one person in 100 or 1,000 who comes to Tofino without a cell phone, who can't use our parking system. Do you know the answer to that?
I don't, through the chair, I don't have the exact answer to that, but they can pay remotely for their parking with a landline as well. So they can see the concierge. So that is an option.
Well, thank you for that. So if somebody is parking there and they don't pay for parking or whatever, is there an option in place for ticketing, or are we just during this 6-month period, the trial period, that we would just send them notification? Thank you.
Yep, through the chair. It'll be basically, we're piggybacking on the Tofino program that's offered by Robbins. There will be a physical review of the vehicle on site, and if it is deemed to be invalid, as in not having a parking permit for that location, it will be ticketed with a ticket on the windshield. That'll go on for about 3 days. If it's still delinquent, we can escalate that option to either a tow, or we can also have a 21-day letter brought forward, which in my conversations with the Robbins representative, the Tofino example, they haven't towed a single vehicle in Tofino as of to date, and that service has been in for approximately a year or close to a year, and they've had very high compliance. The parking issue we're having at our location at the airport, we have a lot of, I would call it almost derelict vehicles that we don't really have a right to move out of the parking area because we don't have a process in place. This parking will actually, our parking program pilot will actually allow us to increase our parking lot size. We currently have about 12 vehicles on the site that are sort of regulars or long-term storage, I'll put it. And by allowing us to bring in this program, it will take those vehicles off our plate.
Terrific, thank you. Any other comments? Seeing none.
Sorry, I have one.
Sorry, go ahead, Michelle.
Through the chair. So these tickets, just so I understand, are they like a legal thing that people have? What happens if somebody doesn't pay a ticket, and if they do pay the ticket, how are those funds collected, and where do those funds then go to?
That process will be looked after through the Robbins program. So it's basically one-stop shopping for us as a client. And the cost recovery on that, maybe Tom can comment on this one, but basically we haven't had a tow situation in the Tofino area, but the tow would be an impound charge on top of the vehicle. So you'd have an impound charge, and you'd also have your parking fee. I don't see that happening at this location, but you know, we could always be the first. But there is an option for cost recovery for us, and basically a higher cost to the perpetrator for not paying their ticket. Does that answer your question? Maybe a
Yeah, I guess is how is it enforced? I get the towing thing if it goes beyond, but say I go and I fly out for a weekend and I leave my car there and I don't pay, and then I come back and I have my tickets and I just chuck them on the floor of the vehicle and I forget about them, and then what happens to me then?
So,
good question.
oh, sorry, Mark. So I believe my understanding of the situation is we have the authority when we create the bylaw, we will have the authority to charge for the fees. So that's how we have the authority. And then we are delegating that authority to Robbins. And Robbins, I believe, has access through the ICBC driver's license system. So people are registered to vehicles. So when you know the license plate, it's tagged to the person, and that really is, I believe, tagged to your license. So when you go to renew your driver's license, any of those outstanding tickets are legitimate tickets that they have to pay. But I also think that Robbins employs a collection agency. So if you're not paying those fees, then they will actually use a collection agency to do that. Financially, from our perspective, we have agreed, well, the proposal is that it's $635 that we pay monthly, but that's just the fixed rate. So then all of the revenue is ours minus a percentage, 6.5%. So we're estimating somewhere between a net revenue of about $1,000 and $4,000 a month during the summer period. The pilot's going to actually see that out because we really don't know, right? Like Mark says, we have derelict vehicles. If they aren't there, are people going to be using those parking spots? It'll be really interesting to see what the revenues are in practice. But we're seeing, we see it as a plus for us and as well as for Robbins, but for us.
Sure. Thank you, Jenny. So then that all makes perfect sense to me. Then I'm wondering, when somebody actually does get a ticket, how much that ticket is. I see here how much the parking cost and what the estimated revenues coming in. I'm wondering how much the ticket is, and then who gets, when somebody pays, I get that Robbins takes care of that for the percentage that they make of the parking fees, but what about the ticketing money? Is that a same, goes into that same, they get a percent and we get the rest, or how does that work?
Through the chair, I don't know the answer to that question.
Okay, that's fair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions? All right, go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, that the West Coast Committee recommend that the ACRD Board of Directors approve a 6-month pilot project for a parking fee and management system at the Long Beach Airport.
Seconder. Thanks, Alan. All those in favor? Carried, thank you. The next item is the item D, a request for decision with regards to Long Beach Airport water rates and fee increase. Is that Jenny, or it is? Thank you, Jenny.
Thank you, Chair. So we're also looking to update the water rates for the Long Beach Airport. We've reviewed the water bylaw, and we haven't adjusted the water rates since 2014 when the bylaw went into effect. The current rates are $40 per month for non-metered services. $2 per cubic meter with a minimum charge for $20 for metered accounts. So these are relatively low rates. Our cost to operate the system is very high, relatively speaking. It's a very small system. It's about $35,000 a year for system operation. We have 9 users on the system. So we know that we're not going to be cost recovery because 9 water users are not going to cover that full cost. And that's okay because we need the water system to support the airport operations. However, we do want to see the water rates at least in line with other neighboring and similar size water systems. So we looked at Millstream and Banfield and Beaver Creek, all of our water systems, as well as the districts, and we see that we're very low in comparison. So we are recommending a $60 metered rate, which is reasonable. I think Millstream is probably the best comparison, and even at that, our monthly rates are, we just increased them to $93 a month. They are not full cost recovery. They do not cover all of our renewal and replacement fees, but they are relatively high. Again, 43 users trying to pay for a water system is challenging. So we're recommending an increase to $60 per month starting in July, and then also doing an adjustment. We've decided to propose another 2-year increase to $80 and then $100. We've separated those resolutions into 2 so that the committee can support the immediate increase as well as the long-term increase independently. Happy to answer any questions.
Questions, Tom? Go ahead.
Yeah, you're probably shocked. Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Jenny. Once again, I didn't know what the number of users on that system were, and you're right, it is very small. To expect cost recovery would be unreasonable, but at the same time, that once again, the proposed fee increases are now, I would not say onerous, at all. And you explained a little bit about how you came up with the appropriate fee structures, and then that 2-year increase charted in there. Once again, and I don't want this to go back to the board or to the table for revisiting at this point, but I do think once again, when we're looking at those increases, we had to go through the same thing at the District of Tofino with our water rate increase. It's just the reality of the cost to the system, and that if we're going to have that be absorbed by the larger group, then fair enough. But I think it is important that we recognize the cost to the system and the users that are using it, and that we should be looking at the amounts that even coming into alignment with, say, Millstream, for example, I think is not unreasonable to be asking of those users. And we can be projecting that there will be more users. I suspect potentially more users coming into the future. And so I think I mean, I don't want to do it now, but I do think it would be appropriate for those rates to be, to come up to that level, at least at the same rate as Millstream, as a close example that would get us even closer to what the real costs of operating that system are. I don't know if that's possible at this without a lot of revisioning and coming back, et cetera, et cetera. So I'll leave it with staff to that, but that would be my one comment that I think we should really be taking into consideration with these small systems that we have to support. So, thank you.
Any other comments? Go ahead, Jenny.
Through the chair, thank you again for that support. It's really hard sometimes to increase rates. So what we're looking at is with the increase to $60, which is a large jump considering, and we're going to do that immediately. In 6 months, we're recommending to go up to 80, and then 1 year later, it'll be 100. When we get to $100 a month, that will parallel the Millstream costs. It'll be slightly higher. So, and we're trying to do this in a gradual stepped approach, just so because it will be a shock regardless. But at least, because within, by January, the rates will have doubled, and then we'll be adding on another $20 a year later. So it was the balance of that was our intention. So, and we greatly appreciate the support.
I appreciate it. We do have to wear the political end of it. But I appreciate it, and I could see that you are moving it in a tiered and probably a more palatable direction for that. It's just recognizing the realities of providing that service for those small user groups, and looking into the future where we may be hopefully adding more into that system. So thank you, and if there are no other questions, or I'll wait to see, and I can make the 2 recommendations that are on the table.
Go ahead, Rochelle.
I just want to make a comment that if there was, do the people see this coming, that it will be affecting, and is there a way to, when the information comes out, that it's shared in a way that has the history that it hasn't been increased in such period of time, and relative to everything else, how it's been, just to try to soften the delivery?
Through the chair, we're looking to, and I can't remember if I wrote it in the report, we'll be preparing a frequently asked questions. We did this when we implemented the airport maintenance charge, which was the 0.25 cents per meter cubed. That helped a lot with the communications and the increased fee. And so that's our plan for this, is we'll put together another FAQ that'll go out with the water bill explaining this change and then the expected upcoming increases. There will be pushback. Mark is very good at talking with each and every one of the leaseholders as we make these changes. And he has mentioned that if the timing could be good, it is now, because we are working on the water system upgrades. So all of those leaseholders are seeing us investing in that infrastructure, right? So all of the water mains are getting increased. And in fact, it's been affecting them directly because we switched them over with their new services. So they've had to, have each of those outages. So I think that this is good timing in that regard. And we can explain that that's why we have to charge water fees, is because of all of this lovely infrastructure and water that you receive.
Perfect. Thanks very much.
Thanks for that. Any other questions? Seeing none, who would like to make that recommendation?
I can make the recommendation. And by the way, Jenny, if anybody does push back, just send them to Rochelle. Just send them to her. So That the West Coast Committee recommends that the Alberni-Clayoquot Regional District Board of Directors approve proceeding with amendments to bylaw F1106 to increase water rates to $60 per month, introduce new service application fees of $200, water turn on or turn off fees of $50, and water service connection charges of $4,200, effective as of July 1st, 2022 for the Long Beach Airport LBA water system.
Seconded by Rochelle. Thank you. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Go ahead, Tom.
And that the West Coast Committee recommends that the Alberni-Clayoquot Regional District Board of Directors approve a step increase for water rates for the Long Beach Airport water system for the 2023 to 2024 as follows, as it is there.
Thank you. Seconder? Thanks, Alan. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Next item is a request for decision with regards to the Sort and Go West Coast landfill construction delay project implementation options. And is that Paulo on this one? I think it is. Thank you.
It is. Good morning, everybody. So this is a follow-up to the West Coast Organics project and construction of the tipping wall, etc. So as you may know, the construction has been delayed in order to be able to go and re-tender out the project. As a brief recap for everybody here, we had tendered out the project, cost came in too high, decision was made to go and re-tender out and break the project into two pieces. So that's civil and earthworks, and in the effort to get more contractors applying for those specific specialties, and then building and equipment to follow. So given that, and given the extension of the deadline, what we've done is the tender for the civil earthworks is now out. It's going to be running for the next month or so, and we'll be coming back to board with decision on who came in and what those prices are looking like. Given that those delays are in place there, staff went back and with Jody leading the charge here, we're able to flesh out some options of what happens if we run into the process where we get earthworks in place, but the facility may not be done by the end of the year. So a couple of limitations to that. We know we're tendering, prices will look a little bit different. The big one, though, is the grant monies. The grant monies that we're using for the organics project, the deadline to use those monies are March 31st of 2023. So given that window, we ran that through a bit of a grid system and looked at some of the pieces that we're looking at. We want to be able to still, divert our residential commercial organics, want to be able to accept biosolids. We want to address our outdated tipping wall at the landfill site itself and improve on our waste diversion all the way through. So when we zip forward, and I'll just skip down to the options here, there were three primary options. So it's either knowing that the construction piece is going on, we're either looking at an alternative area on the landfill site for tipping organics and managing them. We're looking at hauling the organics for that rollout period. So we want to roll out ideally in November. So November to March, we would be hauling our organics material all the way over to the AV, and we ran a cost exercise on that as well. The third option would be delay the project altogether. What that means is we would be completing the project by early spring and then do the rollout at that time. So looking through all those options, not to bury the lead, the preferred option is to locate an alternative tipping area at the West Coast site there. The biggest thing is that we don't have to delay Sort and Go rollout with our 3-stream curbside service. We could satisfy the operational component and we provide that interim solution while construction continues on the side. And then funding doesn't change. We're still utilizing the Strategic Priorities Fund, as we talked about before, the portion through our reserve and the portion through borrowing. The only risk, again, with their tendering project is that we may come in higher prices, or we may not get the anticipated results we were looking for. We're hopeful that that is not the case. The second option is hauling to the Alberni Valley site. Now, as you may know, there is a private organics facility that we're utilizing here for AV organics, and that's earth, land, and sea. So the thought process is, what does it look like to take the material, if you couldn't do anything else, and haul it to earth, land, and sea on a regular basis. When we look at the average cost there for the 5-month period, you're looking at upwards of at least $45,000 to $46,000 for that option. That's everything: bin rental, consolidating, hauling it, and the processing fee at the end there, all in one. Not a recommended option, but it is an option nonetheless that could be utilized. And then the last one, which is delaying everything basically. So we're letting the organics project be constructed, the tipping wall, etc., and then we don't roll out 3-stream until the early spring. That's not the preferred option. There's we lose out on a lot of these pieces. So when you compare the preferred option to be able to take organics in, we're being able to do that. We're able to debug our system a little bit. We're able to get some good numbers on what the winter months look like, get people more familiar, at least on the residential side, on how organic separation works, because it is a new process for everybody that haven't had it before. It'll be it allows the ability to continue to expand the organics 3-stream rollout into the First Nations community, specifically the Taloquit and Ythulathat groups. And then the rolling out in late spring doesn't allow that opportunity to be able to debug these systems. So again, preferred option is to be able to just take the organics, and the idea is we would be processing them on the actual landfill site on the northern end. I apologize, I wasn't able to get the picture in here, but we have an area that we're not using anymore on the backside that'll be for permanent closure at a certain point. So we have a spot, we can bring it in, we can windrow everything in there for that 5-month period until the organics facility is online, and then away we go. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. I'll look for any questions, and myself or Jody can respond.
Yeah, thanks for that, Paulo. I'm just concerned that this summer, with the increase of all users out on the West Coast, do we have enough area at the landfill to be able to accommodate this?
Thank you. That's a very fair question. And the short answer is yes, we do. Based on the amount of material that we get in on a regular basis, we have a large plateau on the landfill that we have to fill out on the western and southern sides there. The northern section won't be touched for realistically another year or so. So we have time.
Okay, thank you for that, Tom. I see your hands up. Go ahead.
Great, thank you, Paulo. I appreciate that, and support the options considered. Thank you for laying that out so clearly and concisely. And a question around the breaking up of the project into 2 tenders, and you'll have to excuse my ignorance. What is the thought process behind reducing costs by breaking it into those 2 components, the civil works and the building and construction? And where do we see where potentially cost savings could be in breaking it up into those 2 tenders?
For sure. Excellent question. Thank you, Director. The biggest piece with splitting it up into 2 tenders, and if we compare what the original tender looked like before, which was all in earthworks and building all in one, very complex tender, didn't get as many returns. We did get 2 bids at the end of the day, and saw some very inflated costs for demob, et cetera, kind of thing. The idea behind breaking this apart is it allows more opportunity for more bidders, whether they're local or not, that are specialized specifically in earthworks, and you get the opportunity to realize some cost savings in that, just depending on what they bring back in for costs, right? And then you get an opportunity for folks that are more specialized in the building construction piece to bid on that. So the idea behind that is you have the opportunity to reduce a little on your mob demo costs and possibly your material supply, et cetera. That's kind of what we're looking at there. So hope that answers your question. I see Jenny might have a comment.
If I can just add to that, the other thing that we've done from a staff level is because we have the opportunity to go back out and we're looking at those tenders before we issue them. And we do know what came in at very costly, some things just due to procurement issues and COVID impacts. And so we've tweaked some of the design elements in order to cut some of the highest cost items. So we we're only optimistic. I think that there is a risk to this. We don't know what's going to happen. So I think it's important that we don't assume that we will get lower costs, but I am very happy with what the team's doing. And it does sort of point towards the direction of having an overall reduced cost for this construction project.
And if I could have a follow-up, Chair. Thank you. That was one of the next questions that I had listed, was that the Tetra Tech design review, that came forward. One of the issues that we have with our wastewater treatment plant, we went back to a design review, and I think you've answered it slightly there. Is there a possibility within that, if in the design process there was cost savings within a design review? And I'm just asking that in general because that's what we went back and did. We found significant cost savings in a design review of the project, of a much larger project, but nonetheless, it did result in significant cost savings to the project in general.
Yeah, thank you for that. Any other comments, Paulo or Jenny? No? Okay, who would like to make the motion?
I can make the motion that the West Coast Committee recommend that the Alberni-Clayoquot Board of Directors approve option 1 to create an alternative tipping location at the West Coast landfill to collect organics material as an interim solution due to project construction delays.
Thank you for that, Tom. Do we have a seconder? Alan, thank you. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you very much. Next item is item F, request for decision with regards to the West Coast Management borrowing. And who is it, Jenny again?
I will be speaking to this on behalf of Terry, which is never good because Terry knows her stuff in and out. However, I think I know this one all right. This is building on a lot of what we talked about in the last report. So as discussed, we're retendering. We're optimistic that we're going to see these prices come in lower. Now, because a borrowing bylaw is quite a comprehensive and involved process, we want to start moving on this. In a lot of staff discussion, and what we've landed on is we think that we should be prepared to do the full borrowing based on what we received for cost estimates. We are optimistic that with the 2 tenders, with the adjustments, we are going to see lower pricing overall. But what we're requesting from the committee is authority to move forward with the maximum amount that we think. So if you support that resolution, then we will start the process to go to the board to do a financial plan amendment and to prepare a borrowing bylaw. Now, if the worst case scenario happens and we're back to what we received as the lowest bid for all of the project combined, we estimate that we will have to increase tipping fees by about $11 per ton. So right now we're at $130 a ton. This would bump us up to $141 a ton. We're not looking to recover any of this money through taxation. This will all be recovered through tipping fees. That is our worst case scenario, and there will be time throughout the process as we receive the tenders for, first of all, for the first tender, which will be the civil works. We'll see what that comes in as in comparison to what it should for that portion of the work, which will be nice. And then in the following month, I think that'll be about mid-July, we should have that information. And then in August, we'll be closing for the building, electrical, and the detailed construction work on top of that. And at that point, when we get that tender in, we'll have basically confirmed numbers. When we go to actually do the borrowing bylaw, we only borrow for the amount that we need, the absolute maximum amount. And the MFA has a very good system for us to sort of give them estimates. And then when we lock in for the lower amount. And so we're only ever on the hook for the amount that we need. When we brought this issue in camera to the board, when we were looking at the tenders and whether to proceed or come up with this alternate option, which is to delay construction, and we talked about what the implications of this, and yeah, we're confident that we will be able to move forward with either the full amount, although it will have a significant impact on the tipping rate. The other essence to that is our leachate project. So we know that we still have to do our leachate upgrades. And our previous estimates were about $2.6 million. Due to the current situation, we are concerned that that could be a higher amount as well. So originally we were going to look to do borrowing for all of that. Now we recognize with this factor in place that we're going to consider maybe looking at grants for this opportunity as well. But it's a big factor for us. So we're taking this step by step. This is the first step, is getting the approval for looking at this. We'll see what tender, the first tender and second tender come in at, and we're going to keep the committee apprised as we move forward. But first and foremost, we do recommend, like, this project is really important and we want to move forward with it, and we need to fund this project as we're close to completing it, and we need to have our grant money spent. So I hope that answers most of the questions, and hopefully you guys don't stump me with any really detailed financial ones, because I might not be able to answer them, but I'll do my best.
Yeah, thank you for that, Jenny. I'm pleased to see that we're looking at a graduated approach to borrowing this money, and I note that the rate is 3.97%. So hopefully we're not going to have to dig into the 4 million, but you know, hopefully, as you say, that as things progress, we'll have a better idea of where we're going with it. So, any other comments from staff or board members? Seeing none. Somebody like to make the motion?
I can move that the West Coast Committee direct staff to prepare an amendment to the West Coast Waste Management Service of the 2022-2026 Alberni Clayoquot Regional District Financial Plan to increase the Organics Diversion Project and Tipping Area Upgrade Project of the capital plan by up to $3 million to reflect revised estimates.
Do you have a seconder for that? Thank you, Kirsten. All those in favor? Carried, thank you. And the next part?
And that the West Coast Committee directs staff to prepare a loan authorization bylaw for the West Coast Waste Management Organic Processing Facility and Tipping Area construction for a maximum of $4 million in a term of 20 years for consideration by the Board of Directors.
Thank you for that. Do we have a seconder? Kirsten again, thank you. All those in favor? Thank you, carried. And finally, we have reports, information report, the West Coast Landfill Annual Report. It was uploaded separately, so I think everybody might have had an opportunity to look at it. If not, please carry on. Seeing nothing here. Item B is ex officio members updates. First of all, Pacific Rim National Park update. And Karen Hagen. Karen there? Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Karen couldn't attend the meeting. My name is Jackie Arsenault. I'm the asset manager at Pacific Rim National Park. Karen asked me to provide the following 3 updates. First of all, Karen will be leaving on assignment to Mount Revelstoke and Glacier National Parks here starting next week. She'll be returning to work August 29th. So she'll be sending an email out to various parties shortly. The second one is that in conjunction with Clayoquot and Nuku'alothot, we'll be hosting a joint event on the Upshik Tashi near the end of June. Again, another email to save the date is coming next week. And the last one is that Grice Bay and McLean Point project is going to be starting again next week. It's a remediation and infrastructure improvement project. At McLean Point, we'll be removing underground fuel reservoirs and areas of contaminated soil. We'll also be resurfacing the parking lot and improving the boat ramp. We are working to minimize impacts to residents, partners, and stakeholders. And full closures of the area will be provided well in advance. And again, an email to follow. And that's all from Pacific Rim National Park. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for those comments. And it's nice to hear that the Upshik Chassis is, you're going to have a get together at the end of June to celebrate that completion. That's excellent. Excellent. Thank you. Ahousaht First Nation, do we have anybody?
Oops.
Seeing none. We'll move on to Taloquit First Nation. And we had Saya. There's nobody else? Thank you. And Hesquit First Nation, is there an update from anybody there? Not seeing anybody. Thank you. And finally, that the West Coast Committee received the verbal reports. We have a seconder. Thank you, Alan. And all those in favor? Thank you very much, everyone. Is there any late business? No late business. Question period?
No, Mr. Chair, there is no questions or comments from the public respecting the agenda today.
Thank you very much. And Director Cole is waving her fingers at me.
Sorry, I just wanted to, I know I had mentioned that in our meeting last night at the District of Ucluelet, that we found some funds that were unspent. And I was wondering how we go about at this table requesting that the board of the ACRD consider finding a few funds as, and maybe Tofino also, to the last little missing piece for this summer's project that they've been working on for our back roads.
Okay, we can bring that back to the board and through staff. Is there any? Yeah, would you like to make a recommendation or a request for proposal? Is that what it is, Wendy?
Yes, if we could instructing staff to investigate options for funding for the project, would be great.
Okay, I'd like to make a recommendation that staff, whatever, sorry, whatever would just, I'm not very good at coming up with them. I should have had some written down before I brought up the topic, but I would like to, make a recommendation that staff come up with, that investigate some options to find, can bring forth some ideas for where the funds can come from. So if you could, Janice, if you could make something up, that was lovely, or if somebody else would like to fix that recommendation for me, that would be amazing.
Yes, I will do that for you.
Thank you.
See, I can just, that's the West Coast Committee instruct staff to investigate possible funding options for the Taloquit First Nation cleanup. So I think that would suffice.
Thank you.
Thanks for that. Do we have a seconder? I'll take Alan. Thank you for that, Alan. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Is there anything else? Nothing. Thank you. Well, motion to adjourn. Oh, Tom, go ahead. Dr. Steer.
Yeah, sorry, Director Roberts. I didn't have the Chair Roberts. I didn't have the time to jump in there around when the report on the West Coast landfill report, and I just wanted to at some point have an opportunity. Maybe I could just discuss it directly with staff, because there were some implications within the report around sort of the targets that we've been looking for at waste disposal per capita, and they are still significantly higher than we would like them to be by a strong margin. And there, I know that we will have waste diversion coming in with our organics, et cetera, but at some point to have a discussion maybe with staff on if there are areas or policies that we might be looking at to further the goals of reducing those targeted rates for waste disposal from where they're currently sitting at 559 to the 400 level. And I know through education and all those other types of programs that are critically important with organics, et cetera, going on. But I didn't know if staff had anything that might be an implication for the West Coast Committee to bring to the board that might help expedite that goal of reaching those targets. Thank you.
Thanks for that. Go ahead, Jenny. You have a comment on that? Thank you.
Yeah, through the chair. Paulo actually has a presentation prepared for this report. However, I do feel that this meeting has been very full and lengthy, and I suspect that maybe I would suggest that maybe what we could do is add that presentation to the next West Coast Committee, because I do feel that there's a lot of passion and interest in the landfill and the information. And we have the presentation prepared already. So if we can add that to the agenda for the next West Coast Committee, and then we can discuss it as a group.
We're okay with that? Yeah, sounds like a plan. Thank you. And last item, motion to adjourn. Thanks, Alan and Rochelle and everyone. Thank you all very much. It was a good meeting, and have a good week. Thank you.